question I'm going to be responding to is, how would you describe in your own words your mental health problem or experiences of distress? My experience of my mental health, how would I describe it? For me, it's like a roller coaster where I'm always up and down, and it's really confusing for me and for the people around me because I really struggle with relationships anyway. I'm very close to someone and I'm very attached to them, and I don't want to let them out of my sight, to being very distant and not wanting anything to do with them. And I don't know, I'm just very push and pull relationship, if that makes sense. I pull people very close and then I push them away as fast as I pull them in. So I really do struggle with relationships, so it is really confusing for me and for the people because they won't understand what is going on. But I don't just push people away for no reason. In my head there'll be a rational reason for it, but in anyone else's head it'll be irrational, but to me the reason will be rational. A person may look at their watch and be like, oh my god, like they don't want to spend time with me, they can't wait to get rid of me, and it will go around in my head like that, where I'll turn little things into big things. Or someone could make a joke and I would take it very personally. I take everything that everyone does very personally, and I don't mean to, but I do. It's also very hard because I do get very suicidal, and when I do get very suicidal, no matter what I do to help myself, it doesn't seem to work. It helps me to manage, but it doesn't make them any less intense. It just helps me to manage just about. And every single time I have a really, really bad episode where I get even closer to going through with the suicidal thoughts, every action I take to stop it from happening becomes harder. So I really do struggle with the fact I do get suicidal thoughts, because it scares me, because I don't feel like I have control all the time. But I do have a lot of reasons to live, which makes it even more confusing to why I don't want to live. I don't know if that makes sense. Some people, when they feel suicidal, they can list all the reasons why they don't want to be here and can't list the reasons why they want to, whereas I can list so many reasons why I want to live, but none of them are enough to keep me alive. So my experience of mental health is almost like a roller coaster where I struggle with relationships and I struggle with suicidal thoughts. I also struggle with urges of self-harm, where I almost feel the need to self-harm when something goes wrong or I don't have control, or I feel very pressurized, and it's very hard not to. So that's another thing I really struggle with. And when I don't self-harm and I don't have that control, I get very angry and irritable, and I almost need it to release all these emotions in me, and nothing is almost good enough to replace it. So I do struggle with self-harm, and it is very tricky not to, but I'm doing very well at the moment where I haven't done it in 2 months. But it is very hard. Another thing in my experience of mental health that was really hard for me is the idea that I never really had a label that I could identify with. So when I was younger, they told me I had generalized anxiety disorder and I had depression, and I never felt that that really represented me, and I never really could recognize myself in it because I always saw that there was something else wrong with me. By having this label of depression and generalized anxiety, I didn't feel the treatment that was given to me was working, and the professionals that I saw didn't understand because they were certain that I had depression and they were certain that I did have generalized anxiety disorder. but I never felt that really fitted with me, and that was the reason why the treatment I had never really worked. And it really upset me when it didn't work. I wanted something to work, and I almost felt like I couldn't be helped by it not working. But then I was given the label of borderline personality disorder, and now I'm doing group therapy in that, and I feel like I can almost fit with that label. All the things that fit into borderline personality disorder I can identify with, and I feel like it is a way of understanding how I feel and what's going on in my head, and it allows me to talk to people that understand how I feel because they either have it themselves or they have dealt with someone with it. For me, that is also an experience of mental health where I never felt I was understood. I just felt like I was by myself and I didn't fit in anywhere, and there was something wrong with me. My experience of mental health as well has also been hard because of the amount of stigma around mental health, where I almost felt like I had to keep everything quiet and I had to pretend to be normal, and I had to pretend that I was okay and I was happy, because the idea of being mentally ill was scary for some people, and they would judge you and they wouldn't talk to you, and so I still feel there's a lot of stigma around mental health. So it really affected me growing up, and even now, where I'm very careful about telling people that I have a mental illness, and you know that affected my experience because I didn't seek help earlier because I was scared, and I was very careful with who I would tell and what I would tell to them, so I wouldn't even tell them the full story. So that affected the level of help I received when I was younger. So because I wasn't honest with myself almost, and because I wasn't honest with other people, I didn't receive the help that I needed earlier, and so I was almost suffering in silence. And because I wasn't telling other people what was going on with me and what was going on in my head and how sick I was getting, I was gradually getting more sick and needing a more intense level of support because I refused to almost open up early. So yeah, that was my first response to the question of my experience of distress and mental health. Next question is, has anything particular helped you or made things worse along the way? So the things that have helped me is 100% my friends being there for me and always telling me that things are going to be okay and always having someone to speak to. It sounds silly, but what also helped me was having my dogs. So my dogs were almost like another healthy, I think, coping mechanism for me, where every time I felt sad I would play with my dogs, and it would be a way of me forgetting things were like wrong and like icky. They would always comfort me and they would never leave me, like they were very much attached to me. So that was a good coping mechanism for me. So I was very into music and creativity when I was younger. I still am, but I don't practice like art and creativity and music as much as I used to. Every time I was sad or I needed to escape almost reality, I would turn to art and express myself through art, and I'd express myself through music, and I'd write like long compositions of music that expressed how I felt. We used to have spring concerts and winter concerts and Christmas carols and everything, and I would play in the concerts. People would love what I would play, and you know, it made me feel better because it was my way of expressing how I felt and they liked it, so I almost felt understood in a different way. What else helped me? I'm not sure what else helped me when I was younger, but right now what has helped me has been going to like authority figures, I don't know if that's the right word, but professionals that are able to help me in my situation. So for example, I went to a youth worker and she helped me to get out of the house I was living in with my family, as it wasn't a really nice environment for me to live in. So she really helped me, and she was always there for me whenever I needed her. She was really good to me. So she really supported me along the way. And now I have a support worker, and she is also very amazing. And whenever I need her, she's there for me. And she helps me in different ways, where she'll speak to me if I need to speak, or sometimes I won't want to speak and I'll be very withdrawn. So we'll draw pictures and I'll draw how I feel instead. So it'll go back to when I was younger, where I would express myself through paintings and art and music. So in our sessions we'll draw, and that's another way of me expressing myself. Or we'll just talk about like small talk, like what was on the telly or our day or stuff, just to distract myself, because sometimes I don't always want to talk about how I feel and I just need someone to distract me. So she supports me in different ways, which really helps me. So at the moment, those are the things that are supporting me and are helping me. Now on to the things that didn't help me. What didn't help me was the stigma around mental health. So I used to almost use my friends as a tester, where that sounds really bad, but like my friends would come out and say, oh, I've got depression, I've got bipolar, I've got this, I've got that, and I would try and like see the reaction people would give to them, so I knew if I could be open with people about how I felt and what I had. And they never really got good responses, and they were teased and they were bullied, and so they weren't treated very nicely. And then it got to a point where my nan passed away when I was about 14, and I didn't care about what people thought anymore, because I was so like zoned out. I wasn't really with reality. I was very sick and I didn't care. I was self-harming very heavily at this point. And then someone went to my teacher, and my teacher didn't really have an understanding of mental health or of self-harm. So he called me into his office and asked me like what was going on and if I was okay. So I was like, oh my god, he cares. And then he asked to see my arms, and then I showed him, and he basically said that it wasn't that bad and it could be a lot worse. So it really like made me feel really undermined, and told me that I was an attention seeker, and he didn't understand why I would do such a thing. So it really pushed me back from even trying to get help, and I didn't really want to reach out after that. Another thing that didn't help me was my family. My family, they believed I was attention seeking, and they would just believe I was moody, and they were very horrible to me. And every time that they realised or figured out that I was going to a therapy session, they would make it into a joke. They would tell me that I belonged in a crazy house, or you know, like really horrible comments, and it just wasn't nice. And I got called an attention seeker a lot, or that self-harm was a phase and that I'd grow out of it. What didn't help was the lack of understanding around mental health and the stigma. It really stopped me from getting help. And another thing that didn't help me was there isn't enough awareness of what services are out there. Like now I'm very aware of all the services, like there are so many services that are available, but a lot of them are hidden and you really need to search for them to find them. And I think that's really a shame, because like there are really good services that can help people, but there isn't a lot of awareness for them. And so for people that are really scared of getting help, they're not going to see these services. When I was younger, I didn't know where to turn to, and it made me feel very lonely, and I didn't know if there was anyone to help me, or if there was anyone that was going to care or help me or make me feel like I mattered. I don't know if this would be related to mental health or this subject, but the amount of work in school that people had to do, where I would turn up to school and like people would have reasons. For example, like I couldn't do the work because I've been really sick with the flu, or you know, they would have a bit more lenience for these people. Whereas if you were to come to school or to college and say, oh, you know what, I'm not feeling very good today, I'm feeling really depressed and I'm finding like the work really overwhelming, the teacher would kind of just go like, just go on with the work. Like they don't see it as something that can stop a person from doing work. So that was another thing that really didn't help me when I was younger. Again, there was a lack of awareness, and it wasn't just that, but it was just the amount of work that like I had to do and all my friends had to do, and you were trying to keep yourself like mentally stable, but then you had so much work that was overwhelming, and I was already dealing with a lot of overwhelming emotions anyway. That's my second response. Done. The next question is, what was your experience of accessing and engaging with any mental health services been like? To be fair, I think I've been pretty lucky because I've been to a lot of different services now, and although they haven't been the best, at least I've had access to those services, because I've known a lot of people where they've tried to get access to services but they haven't been able to, or they've been rejected, or they haven't been enough spaces. When I was 17, I went to a child service because I wasn't too keen on going to the adult service yet. So I went to the child service, and then from 18 and a half, because I went late, it was 18 and a half, I went to the adult service, and the child service was very different from the adult service, which I wasn't expecting at all. Where at the child service they're a lot more empathetic, I think, and a lot more. My therapist at the time, he was amazing. He was and he wasn't. Yeah, he was okay. Like, he did help me, but then there are a few things that could have been improved. I didn't like how I was treated almost like a kid. I know I'm in a kids service, but I was 17 and I felt like I was treated like a child. I didn't really like that, so I was transferred to the adult service, and it was completely different because I was like, oh my god, I'm sick of being treated like a kid, can't wait to go to the adult service. And I felt like they were very like distant, and they didn't really want to speak. Like, they didn't really speak a lot. It was very focused on me, and we would go into the room, we would sit down, and she would just stare at me, or because the majority of the therapists I had in the adult service were women, so she would stare at me the whole time, just go, start when you want to. There was no like, hi, you okay? How's your day been? How's your week been? Like, how have things been? It was kind of like, so to you, I'm here. And I don't know, I didn't like the idea of just walking into a room and just going and like saying everything without really any communication. I didn't feel like it was for me. And then from the out service I was transferred to a different service. How was that? That was okay. That was fine. Like, it did kind of work for me, but because of the fact that I didn't feel the label fitted with me of depression, I didn't feel that it helped me as much as it could have. But it did have some impact. I've forgotten the question. What is my experience on accessing and engaging in mental health services? Okay. In the adult service it wasn't okay. I didn't feel any engagement whatsoever. In the other service I was sent to for depression, there was a lot of engagement, and the therapist really, really tried to help me. He tried to do everything he could. He was a very good person, so I have no complaints whatsoever about that. Then I was transferred to a different service, and it was okay, like, it wasn't that bad. From there I was transferred to another place. I'm not allowed to really, I don't think I'm allowed to name like specific places, so it's hard to really say, but engaging in the services, it hasn't been that hard. Like, the people I've seen, I've been very lucky where I haven't really seen any horrible people apart from in the child service. And that was really the only time that I saw really like not nice people. And then I saw a few horrible people in the adult service, but it wasn't because they were horrible people, just because they didn't engage with me. I just didn't feel there was a connection, and it just felt like I was talking to a brick wall. Accessing the service, I had a long waiting list time for all of the places I've been to, but that is kind of, I understand, like, I was never really angry about how long I had to wait, because I know that there is a massive problem with accessing services, and there is a lot of people that need the services, and there have been cuts to the NHS and to the mental health department. So I was very, and I've always been very aware of the fact that there will be long waiting list times, and I was always told by my therapist that I was seeing at every single time that there would be a waiting time, and just for me to be like understanding of it. I did wait a long time, and the longest I probably waited, which was recently, and I've only just got access to the right service now for me, but I waited about a year and a half. I think waiting times, depending on how severe a person is, can be very, very harmful for a person, because if they don't have support within that time, they could get worse, or they could potentially cause harm to themselves. And for me, this past year and a half has probably been the hardest it's ever been, to be fair, because a lot of changes have happened in my life, and also because I haven't had the support there. Accessing services is I think a massive issue anyway, but for me, I've had to wait a long time to get access to the services, and especially to the right services. The majority of the time, I'm spending the time on the waiting list, where I'll wait like 7 months, and then I'll go and see the therapist. We won't click. It'll be like 2-3 months, and then I'll be back on the waiting list for another 7, 8, 9, a year. And then I'll see them, we won't click, and then I'll be back on the waiting list again. So, waiting lists. Accessing services, I think there's a huge issue with, in my opinion and in my experience. But with engaging in services, I have a good and a bad experience. More good recently rather than bad. I have no really any bad comments about my experience with engaging in services, because I've had really, really good people and professionals that have been dealing with my issues. That is my experience of accessing and engaging in services. What advice would you give to a psychologist trying to help someone with your kind of experiences? To be empathetic, and to not always be focusing on, this sounds really like, I don't know, but not to be focusing on what you've learned and like trying to fit everything you say to the textbook, and trying to tick boxes as you're going along, because at the end of the day you are speaking to a person and you're not a robot. I don't know if this would be advice, but like being able to relate to a client is very helpful, because then you kind of can be empathetic and put yourself in their shoes, because you know what it's like. Your experience will never be the same as theirs, but you'll have an understanding and you could relate to them in some way and know what worked for you, and kind of not give them advice but help to facilitate them to get better and to go more towards recovery, because you in a way have. So that is another advice I would give is, I don't know if I can say that, but go for clients that you can relate to. When I've been in therapy sessions and I've spoken to the professional that's sitting in front of me, I'll know what I say they understand, and I'll mention other things, and they won't really delve into it a lot. They'll delve into it, but it'll be very like, that's when the textbook comes in, and they start kind of reading through a textbook in their head, because they don't know a lot about it, whereas the things that I mention that they can relate to and can understand, they'll go, oh no, so how does that make you feel like, and they'll go into it a lot more detailed, and you can just see that they understand. Just to know that the problems that a person that is in front of you is going through, it isn't easy, and it's not like a click of a finger that it's going to get better. So when they don't take your advice, or they don't do the homework if you're in the CBT approach, or if they kind of go back on their word, it's because they are on their own journey. It's really hard to admit, first of all, that you have a problem, and it's really hard to do something that you're not used to, and if you're used to things always going wrong, it's really hard to just accept that things might go right. So when someone is given homework, for example, to think positively, it's like, oh my god, I can't do that. Like, it's not in my like capacity to do it. Don't take it personally, or don't always expect a person, a client, to always, I don't know, do the homework, or to, I don't know how to explain it, but don't expect them to always go forward. Like, always expect there to be a lot of steps back, because it is really, really hard to recover. To accept help as well is really hard. So even turning up to a session is a massive, massive achievement. There has been so many times where I've gone to cancel my sessions because I've been like, I can't ask for help, like it's too much for me. So even turning up to a session is a massive achievement. I think the point I'm trying to say is just be patient, and don't get impatient with clients if they don't take your advice or they aren't ready to do what you suggest, because it is really, really hard. I think this is another silly thing to say, but even just asking your client, like, what do you want to do? What is it that will make it better? Is sometimes like the most powerful question you can ask a person, because a lot of the time when I went into sessions, it was kind of a place where I can unwind and just speak, and no one ever really asked me what I actually wanted and what I would benefit from, like not just in therapy but I mean in life, like what would actually help me. And then there was this one therapist I had where he asked me, like, what do you actually want? Like, what is it that would make everything, like, not better but a bit better for you? And I said, you know what, if I left my house, that would be the thing for me, that would make me a bit better. And so that is what we worked towards. It was me getting out of my house, and here I am. And I am a lot better now. And so I think just asking your client, like, what is it that you really want to achieve, and what do you think you can benefit from? Is there anything in particular that you feel will help you? For me, I was very visual, so what helped me was like having the child service be very visual and doing lots of art with me. But I guess that's just personal preference. But for me, what helped me was doing things more visual and more goal-centered, and having things to look forward to. So each session felt like I had achieved something and I was taking something away, rather than just speaking and constantly like focusing on the negative. With goal-centered and art, I was almost taking something away, and I almost felt like I'd achieved something. So yeah, that is my response to what advice I would give to somebody working within mental health. I'm going to be responding to what other support or help do you think could have helped you to manage life differently? I would have definitely dealt with life differently if I had the support in school that I needed and asked for. So if there was almost mental health first aiders in school, or there was some kind of training within schools where teachers can have an understanding of how a person can experience things mentally rather than just physically, because they seem to understand the physical health. So if someone had asthma, or if someone had a heart condition, or if somebody had a broken leg, they understood that. But as soon as it turned to mental health, none of my teachers understood. So I think having more of an understanding in schools would have definitely have helped me deal with life differently. Another thing that would have helped, I've forgotten the question again. Another thing that would have helped me deal with life differently, would have been my family. If I had my family supporting me, that would have been nice. It would have helped me to deal with life differently. I probably wouldn't have got as sick as I did and am, because I wouldn't have suffered in silence, and I would have reached for help a lot earlier. Other help that could have helped me probably would have been from my friends. So if they also had more of an understanding, they probably could have helped me a bit better, because a lot of them, when I tell them my issues and what was going on at home, they've kind of run away because they were very overwhelmed. And to be fair, I don't blame them, because there was a lot of things to deal with. But I think if people had more of an understanding of mental health in general, so just not just teachers, but people in general, I think that would help a lot of people, and it would have helped me as well. If there was more awareness around support groups, and there is more awareness around places that people can go just for a chit chat, or just for like a drink, and to play games, and just to be around people that understand them, I think that would have helped me a lot to deal with life differently, and to just feel like I belonged somewhere. What else could have helped me was also TV programs, because I think on TV programs there is a negative view of mental health. So that would help me if there was a more positive like role model, where the people on TV, I don't know, like it showed more recovery based people, and it showed that recovery is possible and there are people that cared, rather than almost the scariest, like unrealistic approaches of mental health. What used to terrify me when I was younger was the idea of a psychiatric unit, and I used to have this idea of the movie version of a psychiatric unit, and it used to terrify me that if I was to tell anybody about what was going on in my head, or how sick I was, or the fact I was self-harming, I would end up in one of these places. And I didn't want to, because they looked very scary in the American horror films, and I don't think anyone would have wanted to end up in the American horror film psychiatric unit. But that isn't what they're like. I think if there was more of a positive view on mental health within TV programs and within films, a lot more people come like for help and come out and tell people and reach out. I definitely would have, but everything I used to see on the TV used to absolutely terrify me. What else could have helped me was if there was a different level of pressure, because I felt like there was a lot of pressure on me when I was younger to be perfect and to be happy and to know what I wanted to do when I was older, and to know what I wanted to do at uni, and to be smart and to pass all my exams, and there was just so much pressure to be perfect. And even with amongst girls, and I think it's growing amongst boys now, to be a certain image. So for girls it was to be very, very slim, almost like a Barbie doll, and to have really long hair, which I did used to have, but I've cut it all off now. But you know, there was this image of being perfect. The amount of pressure of being a teenager was incredible. And when someone failed their exams, and when I failed my exams, you felt like awful, because you know, you wanted to be like everyone else, and you felt stupid if you didn't pass an exam, and why didn't I pass the exam, like am I not good enough, kind of thing. And trying to pass all these exams when you've got nothing in your stomach and you haven't eaten for a week, you know, it's the last thing that would have helped me differently in terms of support is if I literally just had someone to speak to. So when I was younger, a lot of people just thought I was attention seeking, and that you know, it was small issues and I could just get over it, and just because I was a teenager, they were the things that were bothering me. If I literally just had someone to talk to and just to laugh it off with, and you know, just to have that person to make me a bit like calmer. I'm not quite sure what to do for the final video. I'm kind of stuck between two questions, but I'm going to do my last video on self-harm and people's views of it being attention seeking. I don't think, and I know, self-harm isn't a way of gaining attention. The majority of people who self-harm don't actually show it, and they hide it. I started self-harming when I was about 7. I used to tie my shoes really, really tight to the point that my feet would go blue and I couldn't really feel my feet. And then from there I went to cutting when I was about 12. I went through various stages where I would wear bandages and I think they looked cool and nobody would know, but of course they knew. But in my head I thought no one would know if I wear bandages. I would wear long tops in summer, I would wear long gloves, I would wear neck gloves, I would wear bracelets, and I've recently just taken all my bracelets off, but I've got previous videos on YouTube where I'm not quite sure if there are any videos where you can see my arms, but I used to wear like bracelets up to about here and on here on this arm, and I've taken them off because I don't see why I should hide who I am anymore. Plus I haven't done it in 2 months, so you can't really see anything anyway. I used to try every single method to hide the fact I self-harmed. I didn't actually really tell anyone apart from my therapist, from my best friend, and recently I've told my support worker. I told my mum because I was scared. I didn't really want to, so I told in total about 5 people in my entire life, and I'm 21. And so for me it wasn't attention seeking because nobody really knew, and on top of that I always used to hide it. Just because a person cuts doesn't mean it's the only way of self-harm. So some people may drink, some people may smoke, some people might be in a harmful relationship but refuses to let the relationship go because they like it in a way, or you know, they might be very reckless and that is their way of self-harm. So just because a person self-harms doesn't mean, you know, they are attention seeking, because there are many different forms of self-harm and you can't always see them. For a person to come out and say they self-harm is such an achievement, and it's something I really struggle with. On camera it's fine because I don't feel too bad about it because of the fact that I don't know anybody really on the internet. That sounds so sad. But nobody I know personally is going to see this video and sees my videos. Nobody knows I've got a YouTube channel. So I don't feel the urge to hide who I am. I can be very open, but I feel like with the people I know and with people in public, because they can see me physically in front of them, I feel like I need to hide. The fact that there is almost like a taboo around self-harm, like, oh my god, look at these people, like they are attention seeking and how could they do this themselves? Like, I think every person in a way does self-harm. Maybe not physically, but they do something that harms them, but they prefer to stay within that situation rather than getting out. A lot of people don't even realise that they are self-harming because they're just not aware. You know, just because a person has physical scars on their arms, you know, it's very hard for a person to admit they do it, and it's very brave as well. It's taken me absolutely years to even say it. I couldn't even say the word self-harm for years because I was almost scared to say it. One thing that has made me want to speak about it and talk about it is by giving myself more awareness of it, and by sharing the fact I do it with others and I used to do it and how I do it, it actually stops me, because it's the idea of, again, suffering in silence. And when nobody knew, I felt like, well, I can do it because nobody knows. It's almost like my secret, and it was something I was hiding, and almost like because nobody knew, I almost had more control. I never ever planned on anyone seeing my arms. So even just to take off my braces is really like weird for me, because I never actually thought this day would come, but it did. By making people aware, I don't know, but it kind of made me stop doing it as much as I was, because I was like, no, they know I'm doing it and they know how much I'm doing it and they know it's wrong and I know it's wrong, and just the fact that somebody was aware really had an impact. And so I tried to hide it more, even though a lot of people knew, and by doing that it almost increased it again, the amount I was cutting. And so that's why recently I've taken all my bracelets off. I almost can't hide it now, and if self-harming was attention seeking, I would be self-harming. But the fact that I can see my arms and everyone else can see my arms, I feel like I physically cannot cut because of the fact that people can see. It upsets me when people say that self-harming is attention seeking, because you're almost judging a person before you've even got to know them. And I don't know, I think it's quite hypocritical, because a person could be holding a beer and they know the harm it's going to cause their liver, yet they can stand there and tell a person that self-harm is attention seeking, and why could a person do that to themselves? Self-harm is a way of releasing, and it's a way of a cry for help, and it's a way of, you know, coping. It's a coping mechanism. So in my opinion, self-harm isn't attention seeking, it's just a way of coping with all the horribleness and ickiness of the world.